This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. Hello and welcome to this episode of Roots and All with environmental landscape artist, TED speaker and Art21 educator Tobacco Brown. Tobacco connects art and environmental justice and is a visual artist, digital storyteller, master gardener, social practitioner, cultural historian and intuitive environmental advocate. We talk about community green spaces, how humans connect with the land, and why it's so important that we do.
I'm a TED speaker and a social practice artist working at the public intersection of visual art and environmental justice. I initiate visual art and living art installations and sculptures from nature's products and materials with the intention of creating collective healing that results in healthy, resilient, liberated communities. I'm inspired by nature, focusing on environmental art as a tool for blight remediation, creative placemaking, and therapeutic healing.
You mentioned blight remediation when we first got in touch. Can you explain what that is?
Blight remediation is the process of going into the environment in blighted areas, mostly disinvested communities, and creating art objects where they become a focal point, for healing, for gatherings, and for celebration. Such as a poetry garden that I did in a very disinvested neighborhood, giving the community a chance to have a voice inside of a specific site.
And how do you find your work is received in those communities?
I feel my work is received on the level that the people can understand it. As far as the continued maintenance of the projects that I've created, I'm disappointed in many ways that they have not been maintained. I've always asked in the beginning, in the contractual stage, that they be maintained, but the grass has not been cut. People come and steal the seeding. There's really no upkeep and maintenance, and that has disappointed me greatly. But I'm not saying that every community is that way. I think some communities really need and want the work, and they will maintain it.
Yeah, that's such an ongoing issue, I think, for community gardens across the board. It's a really tricky thing. Some people in the community really love and respect a space, and then I guess you always get the people who, for whatever reason, feel the need to kind of spoil it, I suppose. And that is a shame. As I say, it's an ongoing problem. But there's so much to your work. It's difficult for me actually to know where to start. But I think one of the questions that you addressed in your TED Talk was, what can gardens teach us about ourselves? And I guess that is a question for you as an artist, but also for the people who are experienced in those gardens on the ground.
I'm looking at it as a point of view from community engagement projects and blight remediation that results in increased emotional agility, restorative healing from the disinvested and socio-political equities. I'm also looking at it from a healing practice where you cultivate the expansion of the world. In doing so, you cultivate the merit and the value and the worth of the self, and you live your passion. You focus on the most important now and teach the community to navigate their lives better and level up.
Are you working on anything particular at the moment? I know you've got a very big back catalogue, but is there a particular thing that's sparking your interest at the moment?
At the moment, I'm focusing on site situations. I'm focusing on things that build community, things that shift the culture and the community engagement, public art projects, cultural outdoor destinations such as theater, poetry, performance areas, things for gatherings, memorials, celebrations that result in culturally enriched and balanced communities, let's say.
And I think that Gardens obviously can have lessons to impart to people, and I think some of those relate to living our lives well. Would you agree with that?
I agree. I agree. My gardens are expressions of natural art that are reflected through the lens of vision, synergy, reciprocity, resilience, healing, in the form of delivering beauty and harmony. So these are the things that resonate throughout my art making. And my projects also promote platforms for creative placemaking, such as the outdoor destinations that I spoke about. And they're intersectionally aligned to amplify the healing ritual, meditation, recharge, restoration.
So that's kind of the lessons that we can learn from a garden. And I wondered actually, are there lessons that we learn through life which actually inform us as gardeners and help make us better keepers of the land?
Absolutely. I think that nature holds the key. In most of the disinvested communities, basically in the southern part of the United States that I was working on, there have been lots of tragedies, such as, for example, lynchings that happened in America's past. We look on the television every day and we see things that we don't want to see. Lots of extrajudicial murders from the police, let's say. So let's look at it as a compositional thing. Let's look at it as a scientific chart. You have the blood being spilled on the land. So you have this richness of iron and ore that is deposited on the land. You have the tears of the ceremonies that follow them and the grief. So you have the salt that goes into the earth. So my work is to mine the landscape, to extract these sorrows and turn them into joy. So in a way, it's an alchemical process for me to take from the land, to extract from the land as a gardener. Whatever I take from the land, I return it in a better way, in a more fruitful way.
Do you feel there are other ways that gardens can heal trauma too?
Yes, as outdoor performance sites to gather together with community and bring people together. Because when we have collective traumas, we require collective healing. And in this way, gatherings of celebration, of music, of dance, of film, of light show, it's coming together in a cultural way of celebration and ritual. And it's almost like we would say like a religious ceremony in this way, where we break bread together, we heal each other.
And can that be as literal as growing food on the land and sharing that with the community?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it can be. And in the way of one project in Santa Fe, New Mexico, after the ICE removal of the male family members in the Latino community and all of the grief, to create a garden that was an intimate garden, hidden and water sources, where people can mourn and grieve, because this took a lot of money out of the family when the male members were sent back to Mexico. This caused the biggest dent. 70% of the income left the family. So we create environments for them. We have food trucks there. We have counselors there. We have people to give them massages. So we do many things to help them heal.
I'm guessing these sites may have obviously that history attached to them. Do you sometimes struggle to actually get access to the land that you want to use?
In the way of trying to find gardens in a city like New York City, I think you need 2 years. I started in a program with Green Thumb, and it takes 2 years for me to acquire the kind of garden that I'm looking for. Most of the land is gone. But the city of New York has a support system where they come in if you find a private plot of land that doesn't have a city ownership. They will help you mediate, negotiate with the owner to get the land. There are also opportunities when buildings are going up and they're funded by HUD, the larger organization, mixed use buildings. If you want to get an environment, a rooftop, let's say, or a space in that building, they offer very affordable rates. So there's some challenges and then there's some opportunities as well.
Yeah, that does actually sound more positive than perhaps I expected. So obviously you're taking these spaces, you're building this community project, and is there a element of reclaiming that land? A lot of new builds, for example, or areas of public space may be used for just ornamental planting. They can be exclusive, they can be gated, they can be areas of scarcity in terms of biodiversity and, you know, the people that use them. So is there an element of reclaiming the land in your work?
Yes, there's a big movement now. Black farmers have been denied farms during the history of America. And a lot of Black farmers are buying land and taking back their family land and working on it. And there's also the possibility that Black Americans will be awarded lands as far as reclaiming them. But a large part of my work is trying to advocate for land that has been denied based on the history and the conditions. And in one case in point, the national park industry. African Americans have been denied access to the natural environment, and in a lot of cases don't understand the recreation. Presently, disinvested Americans experience psychological and emotional atrophy from a wariness that gets passed on through generations. The trauma of not being able to experience equality, like historically, in resilient public parks, has negatively affected Black relationship to the recreational accommodation in the natural environment. And this is a project that I'm working on in my Human Garden platform at the moment.
Yeah, I've read about that previously, and there is definitely this feeling, I think, of exclusion from nature, really. And, you know, your work, I'm assuming, is it more in urban locations?
Most of my work has been through art commissions. The work has an RFP, you apply for it, you get the projects, and the land is city-owned land. So I haven't had so much of a struggle in the past to try to secure the land in order to do the projects. I'm not a grassroots organization in that way. I'm a visual artist. So I'm trying to get on the land and create historic markers. So I haven't been very much into land acquisition until I have recently relocated to New York City, and it is a struggle.
Again, so many questions from that. So probably our listeners would be mainly based in the UK. I do have a lot of US listeners as well. So we have our experience, I suppose, of New York City green spaces. The most famous one would be the High Line. Is that an accessible place for everybody within that community? Is it a good space?
It is a good space and it's a remarkable space, but the community surrounding it is not inclusive in the space. If you look at the social strata, let's say, community members, and you look at the High Line, it's a very elite, well-designed area, but you don't see the sculpture inside of the space that represents the people who live outside of the High Line. It's not representative, but it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. I have been. It's an amazing space. And I know it's difficult for you to speak for all disadvantaged communities, but obviously you are at the coalface and you do experience these things. And I'm assuming you get a lot of feedback. But are there common themes that people from disadvantaged communities experience when they are trying to access public spaces?
I can't speak overall, but I was a member of an innovative fellowship at an organization in Harlem called CCCADI, which is the Caribbean Cultural Community African Diaspora. And at this organization, I had education from all of the New York museums. And I did have a chance to speak with a man who was in charge of the education department there and solicit, feedback from him. We have many challenges to overcome yet in America. I think some things are being addressed. The Trump administration was not kind to us and set us back for many years. COVID did a great amount of damage to the creative and cultural community in general. So now people are just, finding their way back. And it's a struggle, and there are programs being implemented that help brown and Black people here. There are many social organizations, social impact organizations. Yet we're lagging in general. We're still not, it's not a level playing field.
I can imagine. I mean, you talk in an article that I read about land justice as well. Are there ways that that can be assured? Are there things that people can be doing practically to work towards that?
Oh, you're talking about this creative land mapping project to create a wholesome and equitable agency for Black Americans to understand the radicalized history of national park and accommodation environments?
Yeah.
Well, I've been doing my work to collaborate with policymakers, environmental organizations, environmental activists, and leaders in the field, and try to establish best practices. But what we really need is the importance of a cultural environmental education, just a basic one for people of color. And this will increase the understanding of this atrophy, the understanding of the denial, the understanding of how we have to struggle to preserve the memory of all of this landscape erasure, and for others to understand the struggle for African Americans' justice. And then we can have increased visitation, understanding of health, recreation, and environmental policies that foster resilient communities in general.
You spoke about the very literal effects of events on the soil, and I think that you have again spoken about how wisdom can reside in the soil. Can you expand on that?
Yes, well, components of the universe. I'm not just looking at gardens. I'm sitting and learning how to understand nature. I'm smelling water. I'm eating the air, so to speak. I'm walking on the land. I'm tracking nature. I'm looking at moss on trees, understanding why roots are in the darkness. But on the surface, moss needs a lot of daylight. I'm looking at the orange sky after the wildfires in Canada. So I'm listening to the biomimicry or the wisdom of nature and trying to translate that wisdom and communicate it to people. So I'm in the process of documenting all of my research in that way. So if you say, let's go to the beach today, you get in the water. And even when you get out of the water, you never really feel dry the entire time you're at the beach, even though you've dried off with a towel. So I'm trying to look at these little things, or if you go into a salt cellar and the cold dampness of a salt cellar, let's say a cold house, upstate New York, with stones, a stone building. you look around and you see bags of rice because the rice is there to take away the dampness, to absorb it so that the salt stays very dry. And these are the kinds of wisdom that I'm trying to translate and teach people, especially in this time of a lot of mental illness in our society, a lot of people being frustrated, people wanting more, people needing more, to translate this wisdom so that their lives on a daily basis become better. So if they're getting stress, to look around in the environment and find out, okay, instead of strolling on my phone, maybe I could do a 10-minute meditation, that perhaps I can do a 10-minute meditation, that I can go to Great Meditation. I can go to Great Meditation on YouTube and lie down and calm my mind. These things of nature are found in the roots. But humans on the human landscape, they're looking in the leaves. But I'm documenting information and wisdom through nature that will allow them to find relief, recharge, restoration, rejuvenation, and just a better day-to-day lifestyle. My work is for the many, it's not for the few. So I'm trying to do a multi-tiered way of translating various natural ecosystems into various human ecosystems, because everybody is not the same in the human ecosystem, because we don't have a global human rights policy. We don't have a global human rights policy, and that's a large part of my work, is to advocate for policymaking. And basically, we're going to have to dig up all the roots and revamp the whole system. We can't pile it up anymore because so many major environmental changes are going to happen, and we're going to be devastated at what's coming if we don't really stop now and look into the roots and find out how we can uproot to become rooted again. And this needs policymaking, this needs legislature, and this needs incredible focused viewpoint on the environment. This needs to be done tomorrow, not next week. This is the urgency of how we must look at the environmental protection laws in America.
From that, I'm interested to know how your work develops practically. You presumably have a site. It may be a site with existing vegetation, or it may be a new site that's been completely cleared. How do you go about practically applying that wisdom and that kind of logic to a new garden that you're building?
Well, mostly it's not so much of just the garden. It's the outdoor destination. It's looking at the template, the overall impact for the community, how healing can be intersectionally combined within the design, how we can take community members, community stakeholders, people in charge in the government, and bring them together. And this is how it starts. We ask the people what do you want? What do you need? And that's how all creative placemaking projects start. That's how all endeavors on the land start. It's not a business enterprise. It's a thought tank. And it requires first the engagement of the community from the beginning until you deliver what they've asked for at the end. And that's how I approach my projects. I do several engagements with the community. And inside of that, we have refreshments. We distribute pen and paper. We have other things where we have some art engagement. And we do this over a period of perhaps 4 to 6 visits. And then that's when I really get busy. I come to my drawing table. I'm relaxed. I'm recharged. And I start to meditate for myself. And in that meditation, somehow this vision is presented to me of how I can bring it all together. So I start to draw, I start to sketch, I look at what colors, I look at the landscape, I look at to see how I can evolve this project, make it a multi-tier a multi-tier product where everybody gets what they want. Is there going to be water on the land? Is there going to be refreshments there for the people? Are you going to be able to come into this place and do yoga? Are you going to be able to buy things if you're, let's say, if it's a visitors bureau and they want to do something there? Are you going to be able to buy some shoelaces? Is there going to be a store there if you are going to do some sculptural art? Are you going to have some interactive art where the kids can engage? Are you going to like engage everybody from childhood to adulthood to plan things that bring everyone together? And this was especially an important focal point for me when I went to major firms in Germany, was to provide something for everybody. And that's how I do it now. But also safety standards, quality control. You don't want to put a sculpture there where someone will be injured or maimed for life. You don't want to put in concrete that is painful. Maybe you want to do like we're doing here on the waterfront, concrete that doesn't hurt when you fall, pliable concrete. Perhaps you're going to look at land erosion. You have to think about, okay, if I make this burn, will the land erode on the sides? What necessary precautions must I make in my designs to amplify and make that happen? Drainage, electricity being brought to the site that can manage. It's so much work. It's so intricate and so multi-tiered that it takes really a year at least to see projects implemented, and sometimes maybe 2 years because of all of these considerations. Signage, digital interaction, the website, getting the website up, making sure that you've really, first and foremost, delivered the product that the community asked for.
I do wonder if there has historically been the presumption that people don't necessarily know what's best for them. It does sound controversial, and I mean it too, because I do feel that's an issue within landscape design in public spaces. Do you ever fear what the community comes up with, or do you place complete trust in them to come up with a design that you know will work for them?
Well, that's a very interesting question because we're having have you read about the piece of public art that was done at Hudson Yards in New York City?
No.
And the vessel. The vessel was commissioned and created, and it was a beautiful building. But this was obviously the biggest mistake because no safety precautions were taken. This is a site of suicide. Many people, especially during COVID, have gone there and jumped to their deaths because no security precautions were taken over the aesthetic value of what it looked like. So that would never happen to me because, to be honest, the first time I went to the vessel, I made it to floor 4. I felt unsafe and I went back down. And as an artist who does public sites, to feel that way, I already felt what was coming before it was permanently closed. This would never happen into my work because I look at ecosystems in nature. I look at ecosystems in humanity. I look at ecosystems in public art, in producing, in designing, in everything I do. I look at all the ramifications before I would sign my name on it or ask an engineer with a license to sign his name on it either. So I'm very sorry for the vessel. Aesthetically, it is a beautiful, visually beautiful piece of art. And I wonder what it will become because has to be able to be used for something. But I think I could transform it into something beautiful, that's for sure.
Ah, there you go then. If anyone's listening, they know where to come.
Exactly. Come to me.
Yeah, indeed. So speaking of that, my final question is, as I said, you have so many projects going and you've got such a catalogue of amazing work. Is there somewhere people can go and find out more about you?
Yes, I'm going to give you some links. Right now, I'm not at this point that I want to divulge all of my projects, but I am focusing on the Human Garden platform, which is also a platform that asks for a global human rights agenda at the base of it. And these are projects that come alive when aligned with the many forms of fertility that comes from the reproduction of human partnership. And I call it the Human Garden. And it's basically focused on planting seeds, this incubator type of platform where you are planting seeds that center the natural human landscape. And this allows the natural landscape and the human landscape to be in synergy with one another.
Thank you, Tobacco, and thank you to you as well for listening. This week's shout out is for the amazing garden designer and friend of mine, Martha Krempel. Martha has a talent for creating beautiful spaces and is one of life's very good people. So do please check out her work. Links to that are in the show notes, along with links to Tobacco's work, which I highly recommend browsing through, especially her TED Talk. Dr. Ian Bedford is here now with the story of a bug that I had the privilege to watch in action on a sand mound in John Little's garden recently.
Until recently, the largest of our solitary wasps, the Beewolf, was considered rare in Britain. But this wasp, with its dark brown head, yellow face, thick black antennae, and yellow and black hooped body, has become much more common throughout southern England, where it can be seen from early June to mid-September. As its name suggests, the Beewolf is a natural enemy of honeybees, although it doesn't kill and eat them, since adult beewolves only feed on nectar. The bees are actually captured alive by the female beewolves for a much more sinister and prolonged death. When caught, the honeybee is held tightly under the beewolf's body, where it's quickly stung and paralysed. She then carries it away to a sandy sloping bank in a sunny location where she'd earlier excavated a network of underground chambers. The victim is then dragged into one of the chambers, where it's rolled onto its back. The beewolf then flies off to catch more bees, eventually filling each chamber with a stack of 4 or 5 paralysed bodies, onto which she lays an egg. Eventually, the chambers of her underground prison are full, with around 100 paralysed bees all waiting to be eaten alive by the beewolf's grubs that soon begin to emerge from the eggs. Over the following 10 days, the grubs feast on the bees and rapidly grow, eventually spinning a cocoon, from which the new beewolves hatch the following year. A gruesome story, but as with so many other things in the bug world, there's something we've learned from the beewolf that may now help us. We've managed to solve the mystery of why the paralysed bees don't go mouldy within the humid underground chambers whilst they're waiting to be eaten. Scientists discovered that beewolf eggs produce nitric oxide, which then reacts with the air in the underground chambers to form nitrogen dioxide, which then effectively protects the paralysed bees from decay. The nitrogen dioxide levels, though, are very high, way above those permitted within our towns and cities. So it's of great interest that the beewolf eggs and grubs are not affected by this toxic environment. Understanding their natural survival mechanisms will have great benefits for human health in the future.
You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All Podcast.